Hello, this is Embedded. I am Alicia White, here with Christopher White. We're eyeing the big 200th episode and thinking, wow. But this week, our guest, Scott Hanselman, is posting show number 567 of his Hanselminutes podcast. It's also known as the Fresh Air for Developers.
Hi, Scott. Great to talk to you today.
How's it going, everybody?
Good. So can you give us a little information about yourself as though we'd never heard of you?
My name's Scott, and I have been blogging for 15, 16 years. I've been doing my podcast for 11 plus years. Been a software engineer for 25 years this June. So I'm old, I guess, is what the takeaway there is. I'm not sure if that's valuable or not. But I was a professor for a while at a state college. So I'm a teacher who has been faking it as a software engineer for some years.
Many software engineers feel like they've been faking it. But it sounds like you've been blogging and podcasting since like the day after both words were invented.
Yeah, I would say I have been faking it since Windows Hello World was 93 lines of C code.
So I want to ask you a lot more about your podcast, partially on the idea that ours is still growing, and I wonder where we're going to go from here. But before we get into that, we had been doing this thing lightning round where we try to get to know our guests quickly. It's still on vacation, but I do have a couple of short random questions for you. First, can you tell us either a terrible joke or an interesting fact?
Well, okay. That is an odd question. Let me absorb that for a second.
You were warned.
I was warned, but it's still odd.
Yes.
Like,
that says a lot about our show.
Two cannibals are eating a clown. One says to the other, "Does this taste funny to you?"
All right. That definitely fits in. Good.
You like that?
Yes.
Yeah.
And this one from Chris Veck, who suggested we have you on the show. What one person would you like to have dinner with, living or deceased?
Guys, the whole list. I don't know. Frederick Douglass, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Obama, Viola Davis.
This would be a nice dinner party.
Yeah, it would be pretty fancy. Yeah, I mean, a ton of people. I don't know. I guess living would probably be better. I'll say Viola Davis.
And your bio says you've written code that I've used.
Well, I've worked on .NET and ASP.NET for a number of years. So I've also was the chief architect at a large retail online banking system. So if you've checked your balances or deposited a check with your phone, you probably passed through one of my systems. At its peak, 25% of the U.S. retail online banking was running on systems that I helped work on.
Does that make you feel nervous? Or did it make you feel nervous?
It did when I destroyed all of the world's online banking systems, and the economy collapsed. That was mostly that was a thread not handled kind of exception. But no, everyone's written code that's people don't realize how big their code is. Like as embedded systems people, that you throw together some code. The next thing you know, it's behind a button on a security system that now is everywhere, right? Or if you're the person that what was it? I saw a This American Life where they talked to the person that recorded the Cisco hold music for the Cisco system. That like when you could dial into their VoIP.
Yeah, I know that well.
And it's like, wow, guy's an unsuccessful music composer, but he has played music that has been heard by 600 million people, and he wrote it when he was like 15. Our stuff goes wider and farther than I think we realized.
That is definitely
Can't be
true.
worried about it, though.
Well, you should be worried about it sometimes, especially if you're working on autonomous driving or heart rate monitors. Not heart rate pacemakers.
Yeah. I did a blog post called "Software and Saving Babies," where I told everyone to just take a breath, because if your software is not saving babies, then you should probably just take a breath. But if it is saving babies, then yeah, you should probably check your tests and run one more pass.
Yeah. So how did you go from developer to podcaster?
I think if I recall correctly, someone was telling me, I was complaining about podcasting being a waste of time. I've actually got a whole blog post about how I felt that early podcasts were a waste of time. And they were, in my own opinion, two dudes on Skype, kind of like the morning zoo, and I found it to be a little bit not something that I would listen to myself. And then someone challenged me to make a podcast that was not that. So I went off to do exactly that, and I modeled it after, Diane Rehm and Terry Gross and Ira Glass and some of the great radio hosts. So if my show sounds or feels like NPR, then I have done my job. And I think NPR is not a waste of time.
Okay. That's a pretty high bar to set yourself.
Well, if you're not setting a high bar, what are you doing?
That's true.
Otherwise, you're just a couple of randos on Skype, right? And I think that the trick is, and it sounds like you're doing the same thing I'm doing, is you use your podcast as an excuse to talk to cool people, right?
I use
that's what it feels like.
That is not usually that's our unstated, but not very well unstated goal usually. Yes, exactly.
I don't know. I mean, if I scroll through your 100 and 187,
totally
like it looks to me, maybe I'm giving away your secret, that you're using this as an excuse to talk to cool people, and you have like almost 200 cool people and doing cool stuff. So mission accomplished.
Yeah.
Oh, it is totally a way for me to talk to cool people and ask them impertinent questions about their career that I couldn't otherwise ask unless we went to a dinner party, and I don't really like people that much, so we're not going to a dinner party.
Yeah, liking people is a requirement, though, of podcasting.
Oh, yeah. And we've had really awesome guests. So have you, though. So how do you choose your guests? Because it is about finding people you want to talk to.
Well, it's a little bit different. I think that there are different ways that you can find guests. So people can come looking for you and say, I want to be on your show. And I usually don't have much trouble with those people. They're very nice, and they call me, and I talk to them if they are interesting. What I think is more interesting is finding people who, for whatever reason, whether it be cultural or stylistic, or sometimes it's gender or age-based, are not self-promoting themselves, but their stuff deserves promotion. I will then do the best I can to lend my privilege and raise their voices. So the simple, and some people might yell at me for this, but the simplistic way is the straight white guys will call me and say, can I be on your show? And I'll listen to them, and it's a great show. And everybody else, I will go and invite. And that has turned into a pretty nice mix of people working on all different kinds of technologies from all different walks of life. So the show is very inclusive with lots of different faces from all over the world talking about lots of different technologies. It's just that the one flavor of individual has no problem kind of promoting themselves and saying, hey, what I am doing has value, you should talk to me. And other people are perhaps a little bit more reserved in their style. So then I'll reach out and say, you should come on my show. What you're doing is awesome. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And we have
that's
seen
not
that.
too controversial.
No, I've definitely seen some of that. There are more people that I go out and try to find who are just either they're doing something that I find mind-blowingly interesting, or there may be one of the people who don't get to talk very often, but have good things to say. They just don't know that anybody wants to listen.
Yeah, and I would even go so far as to say sometimes it requires a little bit of encouragement. Like, hey, this is really cool. You really should. Like some of my best guests, I've had to chase down 2 or 3 times and gently but kindly say, I think that this has a lot of value. I'd love to hear from you. And oh no, what I'm doing isn't interesting. So then I'll give it 6 months, and then people will start to get a sense that what they're doing is awesome, and then they'll come on the show, and it's almost always the right decision.
Yeah, I think that's been our experience too. And it's the converse is often true also. Something sounds really exciting and somebody's very good at promoting it and then turns into a very long advertisement.
It can be a little challenging because I think people, The best people I find are ones that have just enough kind of paralyzing imposter syndrome that it causes them to push themselves forward, And if I can get someone on the show who's just a little bit feeling like they're in over their heads, then they'll be a great guest, but then they'll also realize how good they are at what they're doing. And maybe that buoys them and helps them out a little bit.
Yes, we've had a few guests that afterwards they admitted that they didn't really want to do the show, but they were really happy they'd done it because now they had something to point to. And I always think that helps with imposter syndrome, having something to point to and say, I made that, I did that, and I thought it was impossible, but apparently it wasn't. Came out just fine.
Yeah. And I honestly don't even spend much time editing or planning the talks to the people think that they're going to talk for an hour and a half and I'm going to pull out 23 minutes of nuggets of wisdom. In fact, I don't. And the shows still turn out pretty nice because if you let people talk about what they're good at doing and what they're working on, and you tell them that what you're working on has value, then inevitably it'll be a great show.
I am a preparer, but I am a preparer in just about everything. I like to have a plan Q. Hopefully we don't get beyond plan B, but I want to go all the way to Q because that just makes me feel better. And so I do a fair amount of cyber stalking and setting up what I think the show will be about in case someone wants something different. And letting people tell me, well, if you ask me about this, you'll get a funny story. And sometimes when those cues work, they're really awesome.
Cool.
Other times we just let guests, like last week where he had robotic hands wandering around his lab. And that was really, we could have just sat there and listened to him talk about whatever he wanted and it would have been fine.
Well, sometimes people will get in the news. And by news, it could be a blog post or something small, not news. And I will then reach out and say, hey, well, you should come on the show. And they'll say, oh, gosh, I don't want to talk about that, whatever that thing is that got them in the news. And I'll say, no, but that news thing made me aware of you. Therefore, I'd like you to come on the show and talk about whatever you're currently geeked about. Whatever you're currently excited about. And then they'll go, oh, well, I'm working on this now, or WebVR, or whatever. And then they'll come and talk about that, and it'll be amazing.
I like that enthusiasm. The enthusiasm they bring about whatever it is. It's as much the enthusiasm as it is the technical aspects or the science or math or education aspects. I want that. It's cool, and I love it, and I want you to love it too. And it's okay if you don't, but here, let me at least explain why you might want to.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you find those people? I mean, sure, the news is one way to look. And conferences, you go to many conferences, don't you?
I go to a decent number, maybe one every 6 weeks.
I go to maybe 3 a year. So
well,
it's a different number.
But hang on though, 3 a year versus 7 or 8. It's not a multiplier though, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
It's a non-trivial number, but it's a crazy number.
What conferences do you attend?
I attend all kinds of conferences of all flavors. I've gone to WebStock in New Zealand. I talk at one called Angle Brackets. That's part of Dev Intersection. I've gone to Code Mash. I'm going to go to Codeland, which is Saran Yitbarik's conference, part of Code Newbie. I am non-denominational in my conference attendance.
Do you go for the podcast, for your blog, for work? I mean, you have a job, a normal job.
Yeah, I work on .NET at Microsoft. And
so who sends you to the conference?
It depends. If I am speaking at the conference, then they will pay for, hopefully T&E, which is travel and expenses. And if I'm speaking, if I'm not speaking, then I will use my miles from work and take a vacation day. And then if it's a conference that Microsoft wants me to go to, then they'll pay.
And how does Microsoft feel about your podcasting?
They haven't really said anything about it. I mean, ultimately, when Microsoft or any big company, when any big co decides to hire you, they tend to know what you're getting into, what they're getting into. And they knew that I had a podcast before and I had a blog post before. So I will continue to blog and podcast before and after. They can't really stop me. So this is, this is me, right? So if I hire someone and there's something that they're passionate about, like there's a young lady on my team who is passionate about, women of color in the tech industry, and she's going to take a day off later this week and go and work on a TV show that, helps inspire kids to code. I knew I was, quote unquote, getting into that because that's what she's excited about, right? And if that's great, then fine. And maybe someone else is excited about their church, or they are excited about Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts. A little bit of awareness and kindness when you hire somebody allows you to then say, oh, well, this is great. You have passion in these areas. I will support you in those areas. So then you do. And Microsoft does that with me.
That's pretty cool.
That's the way it's supposed to work, I think.
I think so. It doesn't always, though.
No, it does
Sadly.
not. But you're blessed. You're blessed when it does.
Has podcasting helped your career in any way?
That makes me more Googleable.
Yeah.
But that's about it. I mean, I do it for myself. I do it because I think it provides some value. I do it because it seems to make people happy. But has it helped my career? I think that being a somewhat social developer, being a visible developer, putting yourself out there to the limits of your ability and your patience, always has some kind of value. Presumably if you're putting good positive stuff out there. So yeah, it hasn't been too much of a problem.
How about learning from your guests? Do you think you're a different developer or a different professional based on things you've learned from talking to so many people?
I would say that it has increased my enthusiasm for being what I call non-denominational. I don't like software people who are religious zealots. If someone says, hey, I'm building my new system on Rails, and it's like, oh, Rails sucks. You can't possibly be successful on Rails. Blah, I'm like, really? Like, that's not cool. That's not kind of the way it's supposed to work. You can very happily be successful on pretty much any technology out there. So I would encourage you to go off and do what you want to do. I'm not interested in people and their hyper opinionatedness around those kind of things. So I like .NET. It makes me happy. If you like Node, that's cool too. More power to you. You know what I mean?
I totally do. And I do think that the podcast has helped me be more aware of the benefits of lots of different ideas. That diversity of thought.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Have you gotten opportunities you wouldn't have otherwise gotten with the podcast? I mean, you do speak, but you were speaking from the blog before.
I don't know. I was speaking before on my own, no matter what. I think that does come from a place of some privilege in the sense of I didn't think that it was a problem that I speak. Also, that I was not exactly going to take no for an answer. Even though I was working on banking software, I had a somewhat supportive manager, and I found ways to blog about the technology without being secret, technology. I could talk about the things I wanted to talk about in its generalized sense.
Sure.
So I just talked. I'm sure that there have been and could be people who could come along at any time and say, you need to stop talking. We don't blog at this company, And if I absolutely needed the job and I didn't want to fight with them, then that would be a challenge, I would think. But that has not been an issue. And I don't know if that is luck, privilege, or just in not taking no for an answer. It could be a little of all of those things.
Well, there's also why do they care if we tell people about general stuff? It's usually much better for the industry and for us. But
I have had people get told explicitly from their bosses that you should not blog because people might recruit from our company and then we really want you to work here. So don't blog or you'll become famous and people will hire you.
What's in it for me?
Yeah, that doesn't...
Like literally.
Oh, that's kind of crummy.
There's a lot of crummy stuff happening.
Of course.
Yeah.
You mentioned WebVR. You did a show recently where you talked to a woman from Samsung who had been working on it.
Mm-hmm.
Why that? Why that versus all of the other things? I guess this goes back to how do you choose guests, but why that one?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Why not? Like, it was an interesting thing. Somehow someone retweeted something she was working on. It was pretty straightforward. I mean, it's internet. One explores and discovers things on the internet, right? You follow a lot of people, follow liberally and outside of your... liberally, I mean in the literal definition of that term. I have Catholic tastes. I'm not Catholic. Follow liberally and Catholically, if people understand that. And then when you do that, I think I follow 6,000, 7,000 people. Then someone retweets something, right? And then you say, wow, that was super interesting. That was great information. I did not know that. Then you go and look at their Twitter and you look at their photos on their Twitter and you say, wow, this person is like a legit and totally interesting person on multiple levels. I think whatever they have to talk about will be interesting. Oh, they work on WebVR. That's a thing I don't know anything about. Have I ever done a show on WebVR? Well, I did a show on VR, but that wasn't enough. So cool. Let's talk about that too. It's simplistic, but that all happens within 3 minutes.
Yeah. No, I totally
You know what I mean?
get
Like, you can't overthink it. Like, I'm just like, okay, let's do a show. Cool.
Well, and the problem with that show and the problem with some of our guests is that now I want to work on what they're working on. Their enthusiasm was contagious, and now I have another thing on my list to play with.
Yeah,
it's not a terrible problem.
Thus is our hobbies as engineers. I think that's not a bad problem to have.
No, not at all. And she was pretty convincing, so that did make my list.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily feel like I need to go and work on those things. I feel like hearing that person is excited about that, and then knowing that thing is being worked on by someone who's passionate about it is comforting enough to me to know that, oh, well, Ada's out there and she's excited about WebVR, so I know WebVR is in good hands. Who am I to think I have more to offer? I'll let Ada handle that, and I'll check in with her next year.
See, that's a healthier attitude than I often come away with, because I have this long list of things, and many of them are inspired by people we've talked to, and I feel guilty for not having, I should go learn about that. I should go learn about, C++ 11 or whatever we talked about, or I should go learn about more about electronics because I've been so lackluster in that. And we talked to this guy and he does these great things, and you get this highlight reel of everybody's great things, and my attitude tends to be, well, damn, everybody's doing such great stuff, and I'm just sitting here doing my day job and doing a podcast once a week. And
well, so as far as, in my opinion, as far as guilt, the simplistic answer is get over it. The correct answer is feel bad, but put a time limit on it. Mm-hmm. Say I'm gonna feel bad for 3 days, and then I'm gonna stop feeling bad. So yeah, oh man, I really don't know enough about this, but I made a conscious decision that I'm never going to be an electrical engineer. Like, I took it in school. I get EE, 101, but I can't be both a successful .NET and ASP.NET programmer and also be a really amazing, electrical engineer / soldering person / blah, 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 blah. I just can't do it. It's just, I can't do it. So I'm going to feel bad for a couple hours, a couple days, and then I'm going to go and I'm going to let it go. The number one thing that we need to learn as humans and as tech people is to let stuff go. And once you do, it's water off a duck's back. Ignorance is bliss. You cannot know everything, so simply accept that and move on, and you will be a much happier and healthier person.
And yet you do encourage people into lifelong learning. This isn't a don't learn things. This is a don't feel guilty about not learning that over there.
Don't feel guilty about not being able to go as deep as you want. Like you can be a specialized tool or you can be a Swiss Army knife. Right? But don't feel bad. Like the Swiss Army knife, that's why the Swiss Army is the power they are today. Let's give the Swiss Army some credit.
They've got magnifying glasses in their knives. I mean,
like I love my Swiss Army knife. I'm fine with that. Like I draw a line. There's things you need to know. There's things that would be nice to know. There's things you should know. There's things that are trivia and there are edge cases. I know what I need to know about Python, but I would not necessarily call myself a Python developer. But I feel like I've got it handled. So if I needed to get a job, I could go and get a job, get the basics of Python down, and then, and I'll learn the rest. But it's not my job right now. So it's silly to go and think that you can create a character for Dungeons and Dragons with like maximum stats in all locations and go like max charisma and max intelligence. And don't feel bad. Just don't. I'm a 3 in Python, and it's okay to be a 3.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's something we often get questions from listeners, how do I learn something? Like, how do I learn Python? I've been trying and I can't learn it. Or how do I learn C? I'm trying, I can't learn it. I have all these books and I've read all these books. And the answer is, okay, why do you need to learn it? Do you have a project that you really need to learn it for? And that's it's much easier to learn something if you have a reason to use it rather than this is exciting.
So if you desperately want to learn something, though, then give yourself a project.
Yeah.
Like going back to my examples of the different things that the people on my team are excited about. If you're excited about kids' sports, write a kids' sports scheduler, right? If you're excited about getting young women of color to code, write an app that does that. And then pick a language you're unfamiliar with to do it in. That way you have a forcing function that aligns exactly with what you're interested in. But if you're like, I'm going to write a blog in Python, come on.
No.
No one's gonna care about that, right?
And that totally makes sense. With the WebVR, I had been noodling with this idea of using Unity, which I sort of know a little bit, and VR to do math visualizations because I like to talk to my math prof sister-in-law. And it was a good excuse to ask her to check things out with me. But if I use WebVR, it's so much easier. And it was an enabling technology that will let me do that project so much faster. And so I don't do the guilt that Chris does. I'm okay wandering enthusiastically from project to project and finishing 1 in 6.
There you go.
And I don't...
Yeah, well, I was Catholic,
so... Yeah, Catholic, like sanguine is one of those words that doesn't quite mean what it sounds like.
People are like frantically Googling Catholic now to make sure that they understand the context and like one has Catholic tastes, what that means.
That means you like lots of different things.
Right. If one has liberal and Catholic tastes, it does not mean that you are a left-wing Catholic. It means that you like lots of stuff, and that's also okay.
And sanguine, by the way, either means cheerfully optimistic or covered in blood. One of the two.
Yeah, or both, depending on your style.
Exactly. So which shows should people listen to first? Which shows do you suggest to people who've never heard the show?
Hanselminutes starter pack.
Yeah, what's the starter pack?
You can't do 500 episodes
right.
and then say, episode 396. What I'd suggest people do is they go to this Hanselminutes.com, click on archives, and then just start slowly scrolling. And just drink in the kind of the holy crap, this is a body of work of it all. It's a ton of content. It's 270 hours, of technical content. So what is that in days, right? A lot. That is 270 hours in days. 11.25 solid days of technical content. Scroll down and look for either people you recognize or people who look interesting. You'll find the CTO of JPL and NASA. You'll find the creator of the Ruby language. You'll find the guy that wrote Avatar: The Last Airbender. You know, you'll find the founder of TransHack. You know, you'll find the lady that wrote Hillary Clinton's UI pattern library. You know, and on and on and on. And I'm only on the last 100 shows. You know, there's a woman who worked on Halo 4. Here's a woman who's the first Black female PhD in computer science out of the University of Michigan. You know, and again, and on, and I'm still only in the low 400s. And then just pick one that makes you happy and listen to it. It's a good show. I say that now after 500 plus episodes. I feel like I can put my imposter syndrome aside, and I can tell you it's a good show with a feeling of confidence in that.
I can do that sometimes. And there's another podcast that is sort of new and in our field that the creator does not promote it himself. And I wish he would, because it's a good show. But unless he has confidence in it, I'm not gonna do it for him. He has to go there himself before I will retweet, but I will not tweet for him. So yes, I think it is a good show, and I think that being able to say that is really empowering. Partially
it's funny that took so long.
Yeah, how long did it take?
Somewhere around 511. A good show. This show does not suck at all. Yeah, somewhere around there.
It
took a while.
Really that late?
Yeah, really. Seriously. But if I scroll back now, I don't get into the, I find out that shows that I go, yeah, that was fine. Those don't happen until the mid 200s.
Mm.
So the first 200 shows were fine, but the last 350 were pretty damn good. And now I think I can put together a good, solid show every week, and people will enjoy it.
Do you find that there are some shows where at the end of it, you're like, well, that was not so great, and then you get tons of positive feedback?
Chris has a list of our shows that's happened to.
Yeah, I guess so. I usually spend a little time prepping people. We all have different prep styles, right? Like to y'all's credit, but also juxtaposing it with how I do things. You sent me like a 5 or 6 page script / agenda that I am currently ignoring,
which is what we instruct people to do after we give it to them. But
yes.
Yeah. But it's so much prep that it's almost, it's just too much emotionally. It's just too much emotionally for me. Like, conversations don't require prep in my experience. The way I look at it is it's a 30-minute show. So if we had 6 5-minute conversations, then we need 6 bullet points. And that fits into 30 minutes, right? So if I gave you 7 bullet points, we now have way more stuff to talk about than can fit in a half an hour. Then we organize those 6 bullet points into a story arc with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And then we sort them within the story arc in the context of what are you most geeked about? And then we have our chat. And I remind them that I'm a geek who has visited your desk, and we're going to geek out together. And then we do it. And as long as they understand that I'm not a reporter, no one's trying to catch you in anything, there's no scoop here that we're looking for, and nor is there any subtext or subcontext or anything other than this is cool, you should go and learn about it. Then we go and we have fun together. And in 500 shows, I have had one that I was not able to publish because the person either panicked or couldn't handle it or had trouble dealing with that or couldn't think on their feet. Most people who are excited about their technology can geek out about it. So just as you have those great conversations in the hallway at the conference or on the bus with a random stranger who's excited about whatever they're excited about, I try to capture that on the show. And so far, it seems to work.
Yeah, I see that. It's when I try to do it, it's more about if we're having lunch at a conference. I've had some really fantastic conference lunches.
Yeah, exactly.
And I do over-prepare. I'm happy to say I over-prepare. I cyberstalk
no disrespect, people. No disrespect. Well, it's, of course, public and permissive cyberstalking in a completely appropriate way. Let's make sure that we put all the caveats.
Yes, no, that's true. That's true.
And a non-threatening and kind way.
We haven't hacked your email.
Yeah. But yeah, you want to capture that kind of moment of excitement. And the NPR term is called driveway moments.
Yes.
When you're listening to something and then you get to your location and you're stuck in the driveway because you can't stop listening. If I can make driveway moments every week, then I have done my job.
So you've only had one you haven't posted. Have you had ones that people hated?
If I had a show that people hated.
Or one that was bimodal. We've had one that was loved and hated. And by the way, listeners, April Fool's is Saturday this year. You are totally safe.
I have had shows that people disagreed with, but I am very measured in my speech and my style, as such that I am non-confrontational in how I do things. So I had a show recently on alcohol.
Oh, I liked that one.
Yeah, we'll see. There you go, right? Some people didn't. But it's important to point out that in that show, Victor Yocco, the guest, and I actually went around and around on email about the angle at which to take that show and how to come at the problem. And he was with me for probably 7 months of emails to get that right. So just as I said, I don't over-prepare. I would say that is one where I wouldn't say prepared as we strategized. You know, it was an orchestrated directional thing. It wasn't quite scripted, but I know my audience and I know people, and I do not drink, and he is a recovering alcoholic. So we knew those things about each other, so we came at it a certain direction, and that made it a better show. So I would say for sensitive topics, I would prepare and come at it correctly. But I would do that no differently if I were like the host of, Good Morning America. You do your research.
Yeah. And even if you don't have a long outline script, you think about it. I mean, mine ends up being pretty external because our guests are often very nervous. And if I'm nervous and you give me a lot of things to think about, it helps me. And so I treat my guests the way I want to be treated, which is sometimes insane. I totally admit that. But I did like the Victor Yocco one. I listened to it just as I was preparing for a party for our listeners. And I had this idea that I didn't want to have it at our local wine bar, which I love. And I didn't really want to have it at a winery, but I couldn't articulate why that was important to me. Because I knew that we probably would serve alcohol. I just didn't want that to be the focus. And listening to your show, it made me realize that not having it be the focus was exactly why I didn't want to have it there. Because I don't care if there's alcohol, but I don't want that to be what it's about.
Right. And people then, and this is where the contention occurs, people argue, well, suck it up, right? Get over it. It should be fine. Who cares, right? That's fine. Yes, we are all adults. Yes, we can consciously choose to ignore stuff. But at the same time, by its definition, that is not inclusive behavior. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
Basically, having an all bacon bar, yeah, that's fine. I guess it's not quite the same, but it's definitely having zero options for vegans is by definition not inclusive. Now, then people go and say, oh, well, you can go to the ridiculous levels and you say, well, what about vegans? Then what about whatever the step is below, more than vegan? Octo, ovo, whatever. You can always go to ridiculous, but that's not the point. The point is to draw a wide enough net that with minimal effort, you make everyone or 99% of everyone feel welcome.
Yes,
that's all it is. It's not that complicated. People love to overcomplicate stuff and say, well, yeah, but what if? What about that? Relax. It's not that complicated.
Would you take your whole family there? Is a very reasonable place to start.
Yeah, sure.
That will keep you out of strip clubs and probably out of places that your 3-month-old niece can't go. So it just seems like a reasonable starting place.
Yeah, PG.
Yeah.
That's pretty straightforward. Everybody likes Indiana Jones. It's PG.
Any other contentious shows that, not with the guest? I mean, we don't usually argue with our guests.
No,
but sometimes
I don't
our
think
listeners
so.
will.
It's a technology show. Like, what could be contentious?
Sometimes I want to argue with our guests.
I know.
I hold myself back.
I'm scrolling through here. I'm not a contentious person. I don't believe in unnecessary conflict. If someone likes something, who am I to say that they shouldn't?
But what if they're wrong, Scott? What if they're really, really wrong?
It's pretty difficult to be wrong about technology unless it's like it doesn't compile, or it is this as a computer science concept has been largely debunked. But that doesn't happen. If you invite someone on your podcast, the presumption is that they're doing something that doesn't suck. So it would be me that was wrong for inviting them on.
That's a good point.
Yes. Yes. Okay. I thought that about some of those people anyway.
But it makes sense, though, doesn't it? You see my point, right?
Oh, yeah, because our job is to have somebody on who we want to expose, and we want to encourage them to do that, and we want to make them look good. So why would we have them come on and argue with them?
Yeah, I don't want to make them look bad, and so I want to talk. I do think there are some technical issues that are interesting to explore both sides of, whether autonomous vehicles are a good idea or under-tested and scary. And I think that's great. Sure, let's go
People
there.
can be passionate about things.
But those kinds of things are like arguing both sides of technical issues. That's totally reasonable, but it can be done in a non-contentious and kind way. I had someone on recently, Nolan Lawson. We were talking about, is it okay to build websites that require JavaScript? Right? Everyone wants to build websites, and then they always ask does this work without JavaScript? Or, it's similar to the, does it work without cookies?
Yeah.
Question. And some people believe, well, no, you have to make it so it doesn't work. You have to make it so it works without JavaScript. Otherwise, you're excluding people who have cheap Android phones, or you're excluding poor people or people in third world countries with feature phones. That's one perspective. Another perspective is who is your audience? Is that your audience? If your audience is only people with iPhones, then it's certainly reasonable to build web apps without with JavaScript required.
Yeah, and I think that's true of our industry as well. And embedded there's ethical questions, but there's also things that seem like ethical questions that are just choosing your audience.
Well, and that's where you can get into a pretty contentious area. Like some people could argue, and I'm putting on my my high school debate hat, that it is arguable that the building of a web application is itself a moral statement, and it is a statement of either inclusivity or exclusivity, and that I'm making a political statement that I will only support iPhones. I am excluding Android developers through, and I mean it. Yeah, you could argue that. I think that absolute or extreme views in almost any instance are usually wrong. It's one of those "thou shalt not kill" type things. Thou shalt not kill unless like the Mad Max attackers have entered your house and are currently trying to, take all your food or whatever. Yeah, at some point you do have to do that, unless you're on that side where you believe that, yes, thou shalt not kill and thou shalt always use JavaScript. Those are kind of extreme statements.
Always compile before commit.
Yeah, I always commit at 4:00 on a Friday afternoon. I think that's usually the best time. Just drive home after.
Turn off all your contact methods.
Pretty much.
But there are things we all agree on that seem wrong, although like this that we're joking about with the 4 p.m. thing, that you can make a case that no, that's okay. It depends on your audience. If you're working alone, you can totally do that. If you have a culture of hating your other developers, that's fine too. As long as you know who your audience is.
You lost me at hating other developers.
Sorry. The committing at 4 p.m. without compiling seems like a way of telling your colleagues that you don't really like them very much.
I think another way of thinking about it is if you are doing something, it should be done consciously.
Yes.
With thought. And if you do something and you put zero thought into it, or something happens as an indirect result of your actions, where something happens implicitly and you weren't even thinking, or you didn't put any thought into why you did it, you just did it. Why'd you do that? I don't know. Because I didn't just did it. Then that's problematic. If you did it to be cruel or to be whatever, then fine. Okay, you did it to be cruel. But as long as you know you did it to be cruel, like you have to own that, accept that you did it that way. Don't pretend or fool anyone into thinking that you were not doing that explicitly to be a jerk. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. And that
this is turning into philosophy talk. I just want to throw that out there.
The consciousness being, I guess this, we really are going to go philosophy, being present for these things, the being conscious of what you're doing. That's one of those things that I don't know how to explain as well as I want to. And it is a technical thing. It's not just getting lost in tabs versus spaces. It's thinking about what you're doing.
Well, I think it goes back to something we've talked about a couple of times in the past with empathy, right? It's have some empathy for the people you work with, your customers, for yourself, and then filter your decision-making through that, or understand post facto why a decision you made was maybe not empathetic. And I feel like that's an easier filter to look through than mindfulness necessarily.
Yes. We should ask Scott about his other podcasts.
Sure.
Scott, I believe you have some other podcasts.
I've got one show. My other two shows are kind of on hiatus right now, I'm afraid. Okay. So, Ratchet and the Geek is a show I did with my friend Lovey, and she has become more famous than she was already. And she's become a New York Times bestselling author and is now off taking over the world. So she doesn't have time to do Ratchet and the Geek with me anymore, which kind of sucks because it was a lot of fun. It was kind of a pop culture show, and we would talk about Scandal and Kimmy Schmidt and all that kind of stuff. And then This Developer's Life is a show that I do with Rob Connery, but now Rob is off writing a book. And the amount of work required to do an episode of This Developer's Life is around 40 hours of editing for an hour of audio. So that is non-trivial, to say the least.
Wow.
Because of the amount of work. That is a very, very highly edited show.
So it's more like Radiolab, where you clip together things to make them make sense and to make them snappier and all of that?
At the risk of sounding snarky, it's more like This American Life.
Okay.
Hence the name.
Sure.
But like, for example, the last episode we did on faith with a young woman named Samus, who is simultaneously getting a PhD from Cornell while also being an aspiring and taking off nerdcore rapper. I went through all of her albums, picked the songs and the lyrics from each of her albums that best met what she was talking about at the time. We talked for a couple of hours, and I extracted about 40 minutes of audio out of the several hours that we spoke, then overlaid it with her own lyrics that then juxtaposed what she was talking about. That level of care, that kind of like love story or love letter to the person who is on the show, requires an extraordinary amount of effort and work.
Yes.
My episode 301 on my wife's cancer was literally a year worth of audio diaries that she'd kept from the year that she had cancer, and that required 56 or something hours of editing. So then when people like will randomly tweet you like, why don't you do any more episodes of this film? You're like, well, because gosh, all that free content. Sorry that it's a problem, but yeah, it turns out that required a non-trivial amount of work. So no, I don't have time to do that show. Like I love that people listen to it, but I'm a little tired of them asking why I don't do it, because I have a job. That's why. And Rob has things to do.
Yeah.
Do you find that you enjoyed that process of putting so much care into it? If you had the time would that be your preference for doing shows if you had infinite time?
If I could do it, yes. If I had infinite time, if I had a way to take a week off and focus on that would be cool. But at the same time, though, that's the closest thing to like a piece of art that we've ever done. And the amount of work required to do a nice blog post or an episode of Hanselminutes is at least 10x less effort than it is to do this developer's life. So it's challenging to kind of make that decision, but I can't do both.
Yeah.
So I don't know. If I get a week off, I'm going to miss all these other technologies I could work on. I'm going to, it's lock yourself in a room type stuff.
I don't think I could do that. There are too many other things I want to do that I feel I'm better qualified for or just more interested in.
Yeah.
But I remember talking to an NPR host who said that it was 60 hours per minute.
Something like that. It wasn't quite that bad, but it was bad.
That seems excessive, but I think
there's a lot of field recording.
Yeah.
Well, that was NPR started a show called Embedded, and they let me interview Kelly McEvers, which was very exciting for me, probably less so for her. And she was telling us that so much more goes into these NPR shows than we might expect, especially ones that are in depth like that.
Oh, yeah. Especially ones where there is an expectation of journalistic integrity.
Yeah. Yes.
Everything that gets said needs to be vetted and triple vetted, and there's a host of interns that goes off into that kind of stuff. Well, my show isn't like that, so I don't have to worry about that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
So I could definitely imagine some number of hours per minute of audio.
And you mentioned free content, but you do have sponsors.
I do have sponsors, but I'm not getting rich on this thing. I mean, it lets me buy, Xbox games and webcams, but I don't know about you all, but I'm not quitting my job anytime soon to podcast.
Nope, doesn't seem like it. Although we ended up with Patreon and
we said it correctly.
Sorry.
Listeners.
And the Patreon pays for us to send mics to people who don't have them. So that's been really nice.
Oh, that's cool. I just have 2 and then I rotate.
That's what I was doing. And everybody was like, well, why don't you just send them? I don't know. It's fine. Yeah.
Like give them a free mic? What do you send them?
Samson Go. It's a $40 USB mic that we've had pretty good luck with.
That's interesting. I should do that.
It's a nice mic. I mean, most people, we tried a couple others and some of them were more difficult to use. That one.
I send them a Logitech GN 2000 and then I have 2 of them and then we just rotate.
How?
It's a headset, USB headset. That way it just works. Otherwise, they still are going to need headphones.
Yeah. Yes. All right. Well, these are clearly the most interesting things people want to know about. But I wanted to ask you just a couple more questions about identity. You were a developer. You were a professor and a developer and a podcaster and a blogger. And how do you... If you have to talk to somebody who's not technical, what one word do you use to describe yourself? I mean, I say engineer.
I don't understand. I don't have one word. Teacher?
Sure.
Sure.
It's just as one of those, did your identity change when your podcast became more popular?
I think that people who know me know that I haven't changed in any way other than the positive. My goal is always moving forward. I have not changed my editorial style. I have not changed the stuff that I podcast about. Microsoft has not changed my blog or my content in any way. I talk about whatever the heck I want to talk about.
And you don't feel differently about yourself?
No. I think that there's this whole nonsense around the myth of the rock star developer, and people think just because you're loud, you code better than everyone else, or that because they know you, that they can stop you at Safeway and ask you how your kids are doing, which is always creepy. But other than the weird stuff like that, I think that I'm just the same guy. We're all amateurs. There's no such thing as a professional developer. I always love it when someone tries to tell me how their PhD from MIT in 1985, matters to their Angular web development that they're doing today. It doesn't, like you may have a strong base of computer science, but 40 years ago was a long time in computers. 5 was too.
Yeah. And I mean, the podcast does give me more insight into lots of different things so that I'm not stuck in my world. Although I do mostly the same stuff I did 5 years ago on new sensors and faster processors and more connectivity. What technologies do you think will be interesting in the future? Like if you, I know your kids are sort of small. If your kids were in college and they came to you and said, well, what should I study? What I want to do computer science, but what specifically?
I wrote a blog post about this, and I talked about people should learn JavaScript and some systems language. So a systems language is something on the back end that inevitably can make JavaScript. So that might mean JavaScript and C# or JavaScript and Java or JavaScript and also JavaScript, right? It's JavaScript and then something that you can write large cloud-based systems with.
Cool. That gives you...
I think that is a pretty straightforward, reasonable answer.
Yes. As long as you want to go into web development. Or back-end
so one
development.
could argue, pardon me, yes, not embedded or whatever, but even if you wanted to do embedded, let's say, right, you have to learn C and JavaScript because inevitably you're going to be making JSON. At some point, your embedded system's going to plug into something that's going to put something on a hub that's going to spit out some JSON somewhere. So you should at least have a passing familiarity with these things.
Yeah, and JavaScript is, okay, I'm not going to use that word. I was going to say infecting everything, but it's I guess I did just use it. It is ubiquitous. But it has its fingers in a lot of things, and it's getting more so, and it's definitely entering the embedded world, so yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. Well, I think we are about out of time. Chris, do you have any questions left that I missed?
One thing we were going to ask was how he stays current in technology. Do you do a lot of reading?
Just read a lot. Play around with stuff. Again, if you can accept that you can't be an expert and that you ignore any pressure, perceived or otherwise, that you should be an expert. And I preface all of my blog posts with stuff like, I'm just goofing around. I got no idea what I'm doing. It's a way of not sweating that kind of stuff.
So you mentioned you do follow a great many people in Twitter. Are there blogs or books or Twitter people you would suggest as good people to follow?
It depends. It all depends on what you want. I don't have like one. I follow 6,812 people.
I don't know how you do that.
I have no idea.
Well, it's very easy. You don't worry about it. The point is that Twitter is a cocktail party where you're wandering around and you're hoping that you're going to pick up cool things that people say, and then you can respectfully butt in on their conversations. Right. And if you were going to have a really cool party, you don't want to fill it with a bunch of people who think and look like you. You want to fill it with a bunch of cool people from all over the place. So do that. Follow lots of people with lots of different perspectives. And podcast guests will fall out of it because they're interesting and cool people.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But don't feel like you have to keep up on Twitter. It's a river of crap.
Twitter completionist.
Yeah, exactly. That's silly.
I follow 83 or 84 people, and I can't
you gotta up that.
In all seriousness, nothing interesting happens until 1,000. Follow actors that you are a fan of, Follow politicians that you enjoy. Follow obscure actors and politicians that you enjoy. I'm watching a show called Timeless, which is a great time travel show. And the actors on it are not super well known, and the show is not super well known. So I can interact with them on Twitter. They'll actually be watching the show and live tweeting it. And then I can go and say, oh, I saw you on this show and you were great. And these are real humans on their real Android phones or their real iPhones that are out there, and they appreciate that you're watching their show and you can talk to them about it.
Yeah, that is one of the amazing things about Twitter is, for all of its faults, you can talk to anybody and often they'll respond.
Yep.
All right. Clearly I use Twitter improperly. I may go try some stuff.
I think that is not one to say it's improper, but it could be more effective. It's not for me to say that you're using it improperly.
Well,
you will get more out of it if you mix it up.
And I do. I actually, with the embedded account, follows all of our past guests. And as we have more guests, I end up with a much broader and more Catholic view. And I do enjoy that. For my personal one, I tend to only follow the people that who probably will ask me questions about their tweets later. Like if I miss one, they'll know. So maybe I need a third account that's just like everything.
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. See, this is why we do this, so that I get information and new thoughts to think of. Scott, do you have any thoughts you'd like to leave us with? Christopher's laughing because we got an email recently asking me not to ask people for their final thoughts because they were worried that we were killing our guests afterwards, and that final thoughts sounded so final.
Like killing their... I think that that is a little bit of an open-ended kind of way to end. I think that it's almost like opening up if you have a great talk that you gave at a conference, and then you open it up for Q&A. You just took what could have been an amazing mic drop moment, and now you're asking for random people to inject themselves into the conversation, potentially then ruining your momentum.
Scott is not a fan of Q&A. I am no longer a fan of Q&A after talks, so it's good to hear that. But
what I mean? Yeah, it's just like, wow, that was a great solid ending. Now let's open it up to the randos. No, you go into the hallway and you have those conversations. But the point is, the chances are that the person who is most likely to jump up and say, I want to talk to you about, my random obscure thing, the chances of that applying to the person to all the other people, the chances of that being interesting to them is you're rolling the dice. There's no chance that those people are going to care.
But for you, this is the part where you get to say, check out Hanselminutes.com, or check out my book, or follow my blog, or I'm hiring at Microsoft if you'd like to apply.
I will.
So, do you want to try again?
It's clearly an opportunity for me to turn my radio voice on. I would encourage everyone to listen to my show, Hanselminutes.com, at Hanselminutes.com.
.com.
Is that better?
Thank you.
.com.
Yeah, we should sing the jingle. Our guest has been Scott Hanselman, Principal Program Manager at Microsoft, host and producer of Hanselminutes. He's also written a number of books and has a few other podcasts. There will be links to everything in the show notes. The notes that are in your podcast app, but also on embedded.fm, along with our blog and contact link and all sorts of other ephemeral and not touchable goodies.
What?
That didn't come out right. Scott, thank you so much for being with us. Also, thank you to Christopher for producing and co-hosting. Thank you to Christopher Sveck for suggesting Scott as a guest. And of course, thank you for listening. Now, a final thought for you this week, quite relevant, from Ralph Waldo Emerson. For every minute you're angry, you lose 60 seconds of happiness. Embedded is an independently produced radio show that focuses on the many aspects of engineering. It is a production of Logical Elegance, an embedded software consulting company in California. If there are advertisements in the show, we did not put them there and do not receive money from them. At this time, our sponsors are Logical Elegance and listeners like you.